Thanks for being on the line here, and we're going to focus primarily on strategic SMART goals and metrics, more from a corporate perspective. Our next session is going to be more whole person, individual, short, medium, long range. But for right now, we want to take it from this corporations. Many of us find ourselves in organizations, corporations, government organizations, education, whatever, and just give some basic principles and some concepts of goal clarity and goal alignment and going from the strategy and the vision side right into the goal side. So that's kind of our task. And then you'll see a couple of the books that I've written, Powerful Leadership Through Coaching and Unlocking Potential are a few. I've had the opportunity to write 8 books, a couple of quote books, and then one on execution, one on talent, one on unlocking potential and powerful leadership. And so my background has been primarily in working with some great organizations and primarily in the area of executive coaching. And I'm a fellow at Harvard. I'm actually here right now this week doing research. My wife's in classes just across campus, but I'm
Your
certified.
wife's a college student? You got a really young wife?
Yeah, she's kind of a mid-career, running a private school in Utah and did a master's at Columbia and then did a master's in education at Harvard. And now she's on the J term doing specific research in the brain science of learning, and a lot of it's cognitive psychology research. And so it's taken a whole semester into 2 weeks, and it's around the clock. It's 24/7. So I'm out here supporting and doing some research here at Harvard and working on a few projects, and it's always great to be back. But yeah, she's younger than I am, 5 years younger. Anyway, so coaching has been sort of my background, leadership development. Here's a couple clients I've had a chance to work with throughout my career, both corporate, government. On the far right side, you'll see some startups, some smaller companies, but obviously a good smattering across industries. And certainly we honor our government clients across Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, just wonderful people doing some amazing things across the planet. In terms of partnerships, I was at PwC early in my career with leading organizational change. Ernst & Young, I was in their change management practice in Washington, D.C. PwC was New York, and then spent about 30 years with Franklin Covey, leading a lot of their leadership and executive coaching. And then obviously have some great partnerships with Columbia and Harvard and the International Coach Federation. Obviously, greatly positioned there is Key Learning Labs, which is our customized service provider. They do a lot of our customized content, a lot of design, social media, marketing, and they're world class. Have a wonderful global team, and it's great to be partnered with Cam and his wonderful partners there. They make our messaging and our image and our brand look really good. So the agenda for today is really thinking about strategy implementation, kind of this idea of SMART goals and metrics that matter most, and getting those aligned, getting those focused, and getting those right at the executive and at the team and at the individual level within organizations. We also have a scoping opportunity if you're interested to set up a scoping meeting following this webcast with Derek, and we do kind of a 30-minute scoping of your organization and find out what we call the big 6: mission, values, vision, strategy, goals, leadership, and coaching. Are those things aligned, and what gap areas do you have? And then we also have an AI tool for goal implementation, and it's called Getting It Done. And Getting It Done is a smart AI tracking tool for SMART goals. But this smart AI tool, we'll talk a little bit about that, and we have the opportunity to pilot it, test it, and it holds individuals and teams accountable to tracking their goals. So we'd love to schedule appointment post-session, but for right now, we're just going to stay on message. And really the goal here in the quick 40 minutes or so that we have is to put some tools in your toolbox to stimulate thinking. And we'll be asking some questions. Would like you to put even in the chat box there any questions you might have related to goal clarity, metrics, execution, and getting things done. So feel free to drop things in the chat, and then we'll ask some questions along the way to make sure that we're tracking and answering your questions as needed. So we look at design, align, and execute goals. Jim Collins talks about this idea of good to great. And he says, why do all organizations want to go from good to great and achieve greatness? Why do teams want to go from good to great high performance? Why do individuals want to go from good to great? And how do we do that? He talks about underneath all of the goals and the strategies and metrics that we'll talk about, greatness is never a matter of luck or circumstance or environment. Greatness is always a matter of disciplined thought, disciplined choice, and disciplined action. And so we're going to give you a framework on how to set discipline and disciplined thought, disciplined choice, disciplined actions, disciplined measures in place so that you can intentionally achieve greatness. Now, at Simpson Executive Coaching, Derek and I, we really focus on these areas of mission and values. What's your purpose? Vision. Where do you want to be in the next 10 years? What's your moonshot? Strategy was our last webcast of what are the 5 elements of strategy to dominate, compete, and win, and have a good winnable strategy on various paths and plans to drive money, to drive mission, to drive values, to drive customer value. And now we find ourselves coming out of strategy and vision and say, now how do we set SMART goals? What does SMART mean? And how do we set SMART ones at level 1, level 2, level 3, at the organizational level, at the business unit level, at the team, tactical individual level? And how do we make sure those are aligned? And so when we get into alignment, we got to really focus on this idea of looking up and saying, no matter where we find ourselves in the organization, what are the organization's priorities and goals? Then we drop it into a business unit or into functional areas of marketing, sales, finance, IT, ops, etc. And then we go down to the team level and ultimately down to the individual tactical level. And so we're going to talk about alignment and cascading first. And then it's about narrowing the focus and getting clarity around the measures. But let's take it first from alignment perspective. The SMART goals, as you might know, they're specific. Goals are measurable, something you can measure and track and get a good measure with. They're attainable, meaning they're achievable, they're realistic, and they're also time-bound, time-sensitive. That we not only have sort of an X to Y, but by when? When are we going to land those planes? When are we going to close those gaps? And generally, we'd be thinking from a SMART goal perspective, 1 year or less. When we get into strategies and what Jim Collins calls the BHAGs, the big, hairy, audacious goals, we're thinking 1 to 3, 1 to 5 years out. We get into SMART goals, we're thinking 1 year or less, both on goals and on projects. Now, when we set our goals or our key projects let's take it at the very top, at the executive C-suite, the organizational level. We call those balanced scorecard metrics, and this is from Robert Kaplan and David Norton, who are from Harvard Business School, and they've done a lot of research in the balanced scorecard. And these are really measures that drive performance at the organizational level. Now, when you're at the organizational level, you want to think broad. You want to think, what are the bigger goals in a more balanced way? Financial, customer, operations, learning, development, talent, values, and culture. What's my talent strategy? What are my talent goals? Now, if you try and drop the balanced scorecard down into the team, it'll implode. It's too many, it's too much. But at the top, we need to think broad and we need to think out into the future. That's why we call it a balanced scorecard, because every organization has either finances or budget. They've got customers or they've got public service in the government side. You have operations, and then you got your talent. You're going to win with talent. So we want to be very clear at the top to think broadly. Next, we want to drop down to what we call OKRs. Those are objective key results. Now, that was made famous by, in the 70s, as you look at Oracle. And that's kind of where it started. And then in the 90s, you saw Google, you saw Apple, you saw Dropbox. Other companies start talking about our objectives and our key results. As you drop down in the organization to business unit and functions, OKRs is a very common name or acronym to drop them down into very specific areas of the business. Okay. And then ultimately, when we drop from that level down to the team or the individual, we call those KPIs, key performance indicators. And those are down to the team and individual. So I just got off the phone about a half hour ago speaking with an insurance company in the Midwest. And their whole thing is around agency teams across 14 different areas of the state. And those are all KPIs. What are the KPIs for the agency team? And what are the KPIs for the individuals? They roll that out throughout the state.
So
Okay.
Michael, do you have a good example of a good OKR? Like what does that look like compared to say a KPI? How do I differentiate those two?
Good question. Yes. Let me go into a couple examples of each. So the balanced scorecard, that framework, as we talked about, is going to hit in those four areas. You're looking at the financial growth, the profit, the processes, the technology, et cetera. And in that area, here's an example of the balanced scorecard. So you might say year-over-year growth, EBIT from X to Y, or what's my cost structure, my total overhead, my gross margins, what's my staff utilization, or you could go new client sales, new client, expanding existing business, getting net new business, customer satisfaction scores, customer loyalty. On the HR people side, it could be, what's my turnover rates? What's my engagement scores? What's my bench strength? Am I looking at a specific area? Am I moving a certain number of my pipeline or my bench up? Operating scores are pretty common around, safety and quality and utilization rates, et cetera. So as we kind of look at the balanced scorecard, and I think your question, Derek, is, how do I drop that down into an OKR? Here's some examples of what that might look like by a function. So in my sales group, I could then drive into the financial number, and I could say something very specifically like, hey, out of EBIT at the top, our operations might hit the cost side of the business with an OKR, and my sales side will hit the growth side of the business on net new sales or net new channels or new types of customers, new types of organic growth from existing business, net new business, et cetera. If I get over to the operational side, it could be on improved safety from X to Y, improve quality, or cut costs from X to Y. And then ultimately on the legal, on a lot of your shared services, HR, finance, legal, IT, those are projects or initiatives that would support the core, right? So it could be like, if I want to increase EBIT at the top, I drop that into my operations level or whatever. It could be velocity type stuff. How do I get more, widgets or SKUs provided or more projects done, et cetera. So again, you can take it into a project, achieve schedule, time, and budget, or cost, or launch certain products by a certain date, and there might be certain teams or individuals responsible for that. And then the example, I think, Derek, back to your point, is when you get to the KPIs, every individual should have specific measures that would align up. So my example in this insurance group would be, I want to grow life policies by X%, or I need to make X percentage of net new customers, or anyway, the net new profit within a certain office, or my individual sales that will roll up to district sales. But we're really looking more specific, that's aligned to the overall, so that we're not operating with sort of misalignment or independent goals that don't align to drive the business. Have you ever found yourself, anyone on this, where you might have had goals that you can't influence, or too many goals or confusion between these different levels when you announce goals in an organization? Is anyone, feel free to drop that in the chat box, or even, verbally, you can bring that up. But has anyone ever had goals you can't influence, or goals that are at different levels where there might be a little goal confusion? Or have you ever had cross-functional goals where you have multiple players in different countries working on the same project or the same goal, and there might be confusion amongst roles and responsibilities in different responsibilities across geographies? Does that ever happen? I'm not sure, Derek, if you're seeing anything in the chat box, but
Nothing coming in there. I think we've got a Friday afternoon crowd here that's here to listen mostly,
yeah.
apparently. Feel
Well,
free.
so
We've got few enough of you that if you want, you just can unmute and say, "Hey, here's my specific challenge," and we can kind of use it as an example if you wanted to
yeah.
get a little free coaching on whatever you're working on.
So as you're kind of thinking, let me bring something up. There are based on research, there are common things that sort of get in the way of goal execution. And you might say, well, what are some of those common barriers or challenges? Number one is, do your employees know what the top priorities are of the organization? What's absolutely essential? Like, what's most strategic? And we know in many organizations, many people don't know the goals of the organization at a high level. And that translation of what are the top strategic goals down to the department or division or down to the individual, there can be misalignment. And there, whether you call it level 1, level 2, level 3, or you call it a war, a battle, a sub battle, sometimes you can win a sub battle, but you don't win the battle, or you don't win the war. And
Yeah,
so
Michael, are
deep,
you able to see the chat? Renee typed in a challenge that she'd had where
yeah,
previous
what do you,
leader had set some goals, and then a new leader came in and wasn't aware of the previous leader's goals, and so sometimes that causes that goal confusion.
yeah. Yeah, not only do people not sometimes don't know the goal, either there's too many goals, they're too broad, they're too vague, they're conflicting, or they're at different levels where I can't influence them, or sometimes they're not clearly communicated. And that's on the goal. Think about that. And then also think about what are the actions that actually drive the goal. That's different than the goal itself. The actions that drive the goal can be not communicated, or we don't know what best practices might look like. And so people can get stuck because they have a goal. It might feel insurmountable, but are they operating on the right activities that are actually going to help them execute the goal? So yes, sometimes a new person will come in, they'll launch a new vision, or they'll launch a new strategy, or the goals aren't clearly communicated. And do they truly know what the strategy and the goal connection is to that? That can cause massive confusion in many organizations.
Hey, Michael, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry. So when you run these for like a larger organization, do you kind of start with the executives, kind of you get goal clarity for them, maybe have a workshop, and then do you work down through every level? I'm just kind of curious, just thinking about my own setup at our company where, sometimes I feel like our middle management may not have influence on some of our other, like for example, like a lot of our like revenue goals or
Yeah.
um but as you're talking, I'm thinking through, I'm like, dang it, and I guess one of my questions is like, what do you typically recommend to create a system of accountability, I guess, around once
Yeah.
you do have alignment of the goals, like
Yeah.
how often are you talking about them? How often do
Yeah.
organizations typically focus on
Yeah.
a cadence to where,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of like a cadence, like how often is it brought up? How often is it talked about?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's kind of a loaded question, but
No, those are two really good questions. I'll take the first one about it dropping down into the middle levels, and sometimes they're not clear on the measures and that alignment piece. And then I'll come back to the accountability question. the first question on alignment is yes. So let's say, like, I'll take an energy company I've been working with for 9 years, and I come in and reload the goals and I reload their strategy. And we started with, at the very top is the strategy, which is around growth and earnings per share. And then they go from growth and earnings per share to EBIT. And then with EBITDA, they go into what are the cost areas, what are the growth areas, and then what are the velocity areas and projects and things they need to be working on for future growth engines. And out of the strategy, there's 4 or 5 different key strategic areas. They got their core utility rates, they got wind and water and solar and electrification, and their core utility rates. So they got a number of strategies, and then they drop it into energy solutions, and they say, what can we do to drive growth for the business? And then we have 24 teams, and we drop it all the way to boots on the ground. And what happens with the process of alignment is you go through and you say, what are we doing to drive earnings per share? What are we doing to drive EBIT? What are we doing to drive growth? And then as we get it down into the middle level, we're saying, can you drive growth? Do you drive costs? Or do you drive velocity with projects and capability, right? And then from that, they get to choose out of those 3, where do I sit in my role? But everyone has a metric or a measure. Now, where teams get lost is they say, well, I want to go after a goal of trust or communications, or I want to talk about, let's say collaboration. Those are not good goals because you can't measure them. Now you got to go after, that's the benefit of, but you got to get it down to something you can measure and track every 30 days. Because if you can't measure it, how do you know how you're doing against it? Right? And even if it's a project, it's got to be on time, on budget, on quality, or phase 1, here's a deliverable milestone. Phase 2, we're going to design, we're going to launch, we're going to develop, we're going to test, prototype, and go to market. So we've got to know at each milestone, what are the measures and metrics and time frames, and get that down into the team. And then we always say, it doesn't matter if you're global or cross-functional or regional or whatever, it's the goal defines the team, not the organizational structure. So if you're doing a project, it's got to have an owner, it's got to have a budget, it's got to have a timeline, and you got to have quality specs that are going to be measurable along the way, which is the world you're in. And then the byproduct is engagement and collaboration and trust and communications, but that's not your goal. Your goal is something you measure and track. We're going to land this project to this customer by this date. So we've got to get it down to, and that's where, when you get down to that middle level, you have to cascade. At every level, you've got to have a goal that matters, whether it's at a war level, a sub-battle, or a war, a battle, or a sub-battle level, or a level 1, level 2, level 3. Every level has to have a clear measure, a clear metric, because if not, you're guessing. If you can't measure a goal, it's a bad goal. If you have no clear outcome, you don't know whether you're winning or losing. And so we've got to get it down to how we measure, whether it's a project or a goal. Now, that said, your other question is, how often do you hold people accountable from a governance perspective? And so on the strategy side, we'd say every 6 months, at mid-year, every year you're going to reload, and every 6 months you're going to check in. And you got to defend your strategy 1 to 3, 1 to 5 years. And so you're going to have quarterly and annual check-ins. When you get to goals, you're looking monthly, weekly, daily. So the monthly is, are we on track to our KPIs or OKRs? And what's our monthly number that rolls up to a quarterly number that rolls up to an annual number? But ultimately, I'm going to check in on that every week. Now, I may not weekly understand what I'm doing on the lag measure, the goal, but I'm certainly going to be checking in and saying, what am I doing on numbers of appointments scheduled with potential customers? My number of conference calls or Zoom meetings with people, my number of proposals pitched on life or health or home or auto. And so I've got really clear KPIs and actions that drive the KPIs that I'm going to look at weekly. That lagging indicator of policies sold may not roll up until I may see it once a month or every couple of weeks, but I've got to get it down to the actions that I'm measuring and tracking daily and weekly in my role that's going to drive net new business. Ultimately, that rolls up to margin, it rolls up to revenue, new projects launched, et cetera, billable that we're billing every month, et cetera. Does that make sense? So think about goals monthly, weekly, daily, and think about strategies quarterly and annually, right? And so there's one that's kind of upstream looking at the future. And what happens is sometimes most leaders get so busy in the tactical side of running their business, they lose sight of the big picture. That's why we always do an annual strategic review. But if you're in a fast growing area like high tech or manufacturing, if you wait for an annual strategic planning review, you should be doing a mid-year review as well in the summer to say what's changed, what's true. Because many times with tech, that world's changing so fast. Derek and I just met with a firm that's working with SpaceX in the manufacturing space. Well, we got to look every 6 months. We can't wait for every year to reload on strategy. And the goals need to be aligned. There's tweaking based on your different customers you're taking care of.
And
Does
then
that make
Michael,
sense?
just a time check. You've got about 10 minutes, a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, so let me just walk through some of the tools. When we do this, this is what it looks like, kind of in a line of sight. I won't spend a lot of time on the rules and the SMART goal coaching questions, but these are some basic questions that every leader should be able to ask of, is it strategic? Is it going after the right gap? Are we measuring the right metric? Does it have a statement, a very clear statement on the measurement, the gap? Is it realistic? Do we have the right members of the team that can actually execute on this? And so again, these are just some good questions. Do we have 80% influence? If we can't influence the goal, it's not a good goal. There's many of us that have had goals you can't even execute. So those are some good statements. And again, that's in my book, Powerful Leadership Through Coaching, on chapter 9 on SMART goals. Now, what's a framework for us to set the goals? When we work with teams and organizations, we first set the goal, then we set the weekly actions, right? Then we set the scoreboards, and then we set who runs the team, when and who are the team accountable, monthly, weekly, or daily. And so we kind of walk through this. Here's some of the goal examples, right? Get net new business on policies by X%, right? Or increase core product sales by X%. Retain and maintain existing business with renewals. And then we drop it in, we brainstorm with a team, we finalize them, we narrow them down to the top 1 or 2, right? And then they get a chance to vote as a team. And then we have an exercise where we validate and we ratify. So the leaders will generally do a draft, and then we got to ratify and engage the team who's actually going to execute on this. And then when we get into brainstorming, we've got to brainstorm and get into our actions and activities. And what do those look like? That's where we've got to get it to very specific activities that we're going to be working on that show either the individual or the team, these are the things we're working on daily and weekly that will line up to influence the overall goal. And we just call those weekly actions. What are the actions for execution that's going to drive the goal? And that the team develops those from the bottom up, while many times the leadership team, the management and the leadership, regional, district managers, leaders will set the goals and targets from top, and then the activities are driven from bottom up.
Yeah, and then this sounds like, what's that quote about all grand strategies, eventually have to evolve down into real work or something?
Yeah.
That's what these activities sound like. This is the actual thing that has to happen. Because a lot of times we state a strategy and even a goal, and we think that everybody just knows what to do and it's going to happen. And just because you say it doesn't mean it's going to, so it has to get broken down into these little pieces. But then it comes to Cam's question of how do you hold people accountable and make sure even these activities are actually getting done.
Yeah. Yeah, and Derek, your quote by Peter Drucker, all grand strategies boil down to work, right? What are the actions and the work and the activities that we have to do that are going to drive the goals? One thing to set a goal, it's another thing to actually get it done. And so, and then Cam, your whole thing is if people are not held accountable, we know that 14% of teams only meet once a week to talk about accountability. So, most teams are and employees are dying for relevant, timely feedback and regular accountability. And if we're only looking, 14% of those teams are only looking once a month, it's too late in the game. And so you may not move the needle on that lag measure for 30 days, but we've got to get velocity. I know this insurance company I was talking to today, they actually reward not only on the outcome, but they reward on the activity. Like you set X number of appointments per week that meet our baseline numbers, you're going to get rewarded on that. So we've got to get velocity. The magic of execution is in the velocity on these weekly activities. And that comes from the team. And whether it's a project or whether it's a goal, we want to get velocity on that. And then what we do with teams is Cam, and team, we brainstorm these. We focus them, narrow them down to 2 or 3 critical ones. And on projects, you'll have activities that roll up to a milestone. And then let's say we've been through the design phase, and then we got to go into the test and pilot phase. We'll have triggers of dates and milestones along the way. Sometimes it's just you got to make X number of calls, set X number of appointments, or pitch X number of new products to your customers weekly. It's that rhythm, that cadence, and then we check in every week. We say, how are we doing, team? Past, present, future. What did you say you're going to do? Did you do it? Is the scoreboard moving? And then what are you going to do next week?
Yeah,
And then
and
you're
then
going
as you're kind of wrapping things up, Renee in the group is from a healthcare organization, and she mentioned there are a couple of their KPIs that they use. So if you have any examples just to make it more relevant there, we can maybe pull in a few of the healthcare examples. The insurance ones have been HealthFlash current top of mind in that, but any healthcare ones as well.
Yeah, so healthcare, I'm working with 2 large healthcare systems right now in New York. And we do the same thing. We set the vision and strategy with the C-suite. We've got all the department leaders. You got the nursing. We've got our medical director who's over all the doctors, right? And then you have your finance and accounting. You've got your development office that's doing all of your fundraising efforts, and anyway across the board. And you look at, we've got a lot of it's with talent, right? Do we have the right nurses, the right number of nurses to service these people? For them, they've got, certain score, like Press Ganey has a score that talks about patient satisfaction or employee engagement. And so there's certain things you can do to help move patient satisfaction from X to Y. And as you do that, it leads to federal money comes to you, or you get repeat business, drives your bottom line. Same with employee engagement. As in healthcare, there's high turnover, particularly in the nurse area. And we've got to be able to close the gap on employee engagement, those scores, and that can help with retention, employee productivity as well. So again, as we get into we want to cascade from the top. In this healthcare company I'm talking about, we've got 5 key strategies. There's 2 that we're focused on that are gap areas. One is on cost. We had to pull out about 10 million in cost. So we went to our vendors there, and we're looking at stuff like all the bedding. We're looking at all the shampoos. We're looking at the food services. We're looking at all these vendor things where we got to squeeze out about 10 million in costs. And then the other core one that we had to cascade from top to bottom was quality services, right? Error rates, as well as customer sat. Yeah. And then we just look and we'd take that to the charge nurses, to the doctors, to the administrators, all the way down to boots on the ground, and make sure we have things lined up from a healthcare perspective.
So as we're getting closer to wrapping that up, obviously the key is having those activities at the front line being done regularly, consistently, and getting those things actually done. And I don't know if that's, might not be ready to move into talk a little bit about the getting things done
Yeah.
Tool, but that's something just at the front line level. That's
Yep.
really a useful tool to give some visibility into how things are moving in order to reach your strategy. So.
Yeah, and let me just take 2 minutes to hit on two things, Derek, and then I'll have you talk about Get It Done, the AI tool that we have that can track and monitor down to the team and individual level. But ultimately, what we're trying to do with strategy alignment, strategy implementation, is we're trying to focus on our top 20%. We don't want to burn them out. So you got to reward them and take care of your top 20 that are executing both on the performance and on the values. The value for all of us with execution is moving that middle. There's a 60 to 70% middle where they're not doing it yet. And that's where we get into both translation to the goal and ownership of the goal and motivation on the right activities. Collins calls that chronic inconsistencies. We've got to get that consistent. And how we do that structurally is through coaching and coaching around performance management. And performance management is going to hit two areas. We're going to do our performance management, which is it's annual, semi-annual, and quarterly to check in with our people and coach around their job performance and their career. The job performance hits their KPIs or their OKRs. And we're going to hit values. How are they living and modeling the values? And are they driving the KPIs? That's from a coaching perspective. The accountability drops right into the week. We're going to empower every manager and every supervisor to coach their teams around those, in a sense, weekly actions and around the movement on the scoreboard. And that's kind of how performance management fits with accountability down to the team, manager, supervisory level. Now, the AI tool that we have, and these are just some of the areas we focus on coaching, right, on the job performance and talent side. We go after the balanced scorecard. We go after OKRs or KPIs, certain competencies, and then their leadership game plan and how their role and how they're modeling some of the leadership competencies. So that's kind of at a high level. And then as we take it into our team members, we want to coach each of them around their KPIs and around the values and around, Cam, as you talked about, daily, weekly check-ins on how they're doing on the goal. And we want to celebrate successes, clear the path. So Derek, why don't you share how we would take an AI tool and what would we do with the AI tool called Get It Done that helps organizations think about managing and tracking using AI resources and technology to help influence their team.
Yeah, we're really excited about this tool. And as a matter of fact, if there's anybody on here that after I explain it might want to pilot it, we ideally want you to have a team of about at least 10 people that are working on certain goals and objectives. And you can load this into the tool. I don't have the technology up here to demo it for you here. Didn't want to take up a lot of time here, but we can get on a call and do a demo. But one of the really cool things where AI helps us is in asking for updates. And so you can either have an email daily that you send that just shows your progress on the goal, and it will compile all that and create reports. So you don't have to, as a leader, go in and ask for all this information all the time from your direct reports. And then another key feature that it will do is it can actually be where it will call you. You could set it up, and every day at 5:30 after you finish your day, you get a phone call, and then you just tell the AI phone call person, here's what I got done today. I wasn't able to complete this or whatever. It tracks it all, and it'll even ask you follow-up questions. It'll be like, is that something that's a completed task, or is that a step in the next piece? It'll help you clarify it all. And that is the key, I think, to getting things done, is having very clear goals, very clear accountability. And as a leader, this tool can give you great visibility into, and you're not trying to micromanage people, but on important goals, you're wanting to know progress, and it helps people to be accountable. And if they feel like it's a worthy goal and they're making progress, they like to go ahead and have people know what their progress is. So if you'd like, and you have a team of around 10 at least, that we can do some piloting with you, let me know in the chat, respond to one of the emails I sent out with the reminders for the meeting, and we'll get something set up to help you with the piloting.
And I would add too, if we could be a resource to your organization in helping you cascade and set those goals and strategies and targets at the top and cascade those down, we can work with teams, but primarily with organizations. We like to work at the C-suite or the senior team and set those up and then cascade them down to the team. So we'd love to do a strategic scoping call on sort of the SMART goals and strategies and those metrics, and then ultimately down to the tactical execution of that, implementation of that. So people have focus and clarity on the execution side. And we can use the AI technology, which is world-class, and it hooks up with Outlook, and it gets red, green, yellow, kind of how people are doing on their targets and their measures, and will give you some really good data to support the accountability side as well.
Well, we want to be cognizant of the time for those that carved out the specific time where we were wanting to finish up around 12:45. We're a little bit over. Anybody that needs to can drop. If you have some questions, we have a little bit of time. Michael is jumping on a 1:00 Eastern call, but we have 5-10 minutes here. If anybody had some specific questions they wanted to ask others that might need to drop off, thank you so much for joining today. I hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you. And we look forward to partnering with you and being a resource any way possible to help you and your organization and your teams improve and unlock their potential.
All right. Doesn't look like anybody has questions. Paul, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to thank you and say I wasn't trying to be rude to turn my video off. I was getting limited signal, and usually if you turn off the video, more of the audio comes through. So that's why I wasn't there. But once again, great job. I mean, you're speaking my language. I love all this stuff. The idea of the cascading goals and the OKRs, KPI. That's speaking my language. And congrats on creating that AI accountability tool for goal achievement. That's awesome.
Yeah, and we can do some stuff too on the strategy side to help grow value for businesses. So we have the downstream execution side, but we can also do some pretty exciting things on the strategy side with gathering data, market, customer, competitive data from the AI tool and our partnership there, as well as downstream. So we see it as much as a strategic tool as we do an implementation, accountability focus tool as well.
Makes sense. Tie it all together.
Yeah. One thing that we've struggled with is just sort of like, we're in this service industry, and every project that we do is like this customized thing. And so one thing that I've struggled with just with goals is just the how do you create a metric, that would be, I guess, aligned with sort of our, I mean, it's almost like a feel thing, like, hey, like our customer satisfaction, we don't have a total metric in place, but we know when our team, we're executing really well. Like we know when our team's doing it really well, and everything like that. But that's one of our challenges that we've dealt with. But it would be interesting to kind of run through. I'd be interested in the AI thing for our company, but
let's talk about the metric. I mean, the NPS or an eNPS or a customer NPS, right? That says, hey, we just finished this project. Just ask 3 questions, right? Well, what type of customer are you? What was your experience from 0 to 10?
Yeah.
Right? And then comments. If you pick, 9 or 10 promoters, 7, 8 passive, 0 to 6 detractors, put a comment in there as to why you rated us this way. Because really the rating, the detractor or the passive and those comments are gold, right? Because the 9s and 10s, you want to continue to reward the 9s and 10s, but it's the gold that comes from 7s, the passives, 7s and 8s, or the detractors. That's going to tell you about your system. That's going to give you answers to the test on what you need to improve. And if you can get that data right at the end of a project with a customer or hitting different milestones, those comments should be to go to the leadership team where they get a call within 1 week to solve it. You're empowered to solve that comment on the NPS really some take it like within 72 hours they'll solve it, but that feedback and that data for the leadership team to say, okay, what do we need to do differently?
Yeah.
And
Make it
that's
right.
Yeah,
employee, that's customer.
the way that really pulls out good information is in addition to just how was your experience, net promoter, right? That's and how likely are you to recommend us?
Yeah.
So they might say, yeah, I had a great experience, but they're not going to go recommend you to anybody. If they're going to actually recommend you, if they're going to be like, we did that work with Key Learning, their quality was amazing, they were on time with everything, their people are great, I'm going to recommend you. That's
Yeah.
what you want to hear. And if you're not getting that, then you do want to know, well, where was it? Oh,
Yeah.
well, a lot
And
of
why
times
why are they recommending you?
Yeah.
So why are they recommending you, and why do they have a plane crash and are not happy, right? And that why gives you the data to go back to your team and celebrate a success or talk about, we got to get this fixed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right.
Well,
Well, we'll let you get ready for your next call there, Michael. Everyone, thanks for
Hey.
joining today. We'll send out a link to the recording.
And our next one will be on whole person goal setting. So we'll look at the whole person, the 5 elements of the whole person, and we'll look at some templates and tools and examples to help people come down to the individual level from a planning perspective.
But we don't have the specific date set for that right yet. But when we do, we'll send out invites to everybody that's attended these others. So you'll be able to sign up for the one next month.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for the session. Appreciate it.
Mahalo, my friend, and Cam.
Yeah.
Always good to
Aloha.
see your
Thanks,
face
Michael.
as well.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thanks. Good to see you, Paul.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Derek.
everyone.
Bye,
All right.
guys.
Take care.